As I sit outside this cafe, my heart bleeds for my country, Nigeria. Our Nigeria. A nation blessed with strength, talent, land, resilience, and people who have survived what should have broken lesser countries. But today, we must ask a painful question. How can a sovereign nation begin to look like a hostage inside its own territory? How can citizens farm in fear, travel in fear, worship in fear, and even send their children to school in fear, while the political class is already warming up for 2027? Welcome to the Amos Perspective. This is not just another conversation. This is a patriotic intervention. Because if we do not speak honestly about what is happening to Nigeria, then we are only decorating national decline with political grammar. Today we are looking at a hard truth. Nigeria is facing a widening gap between what matters to ordinary people and what seems to matter to the elite. For the average citizen, the issue is survival. For too many in power, the issue is positioning. For the people, the question is, will we sleep safely tonight? For politicians, the question is, who will control 2027? And that divergence, my brother, is dangerous, very dangerous. The early months of 2026 have exposed something many Nigerians already know in their bones. This insecurity crisis is not fading away. It is evolving, it is adapting, and in some places it is expanding faster than the state's response. In Borno, communities have been attacked and civilians abducted in large numbers. In Maiduguri, bomb blasts have killed and injured innocent people. In the northwest, banditry remains like a stubborn wound that has not been cleaned, not been stitched, and not been allowed to heal. In the north-central, communal violence continues to claim lives in shocking numbers. And across the country, the message is the same. Too many Nigerians are living one bad day away from tragedy. This is no longer the kind of insecurity we discuss like abstract policy. This is lived insecurity, road insecurity, farm insecurity, community insecurity, food insecurity, national insecurity. And the painful thing is that this is happening despite enormous spending, major pronouncements, and repeated promises. Nigeria has budgeted heavily for defense. There have been leadership changes in the police and military. There have been official statements, meetings, deployments, and renewed vows. But the ordinary Nigerian does not judge security by headlines. The ordinary Nigerian judges security by experience. Can I travel from one city to another without praying like I am entering a battlefield? Can farmers go to their land without paying criminals before touching their own soil? Can students and corps members serve the country without becoming soft targets? Can mothers sleep without fear that armed men will tear through the village before dawn? These are the real measurements. And on those measurements, many Nigerians believe the state is still falling short. Let us now confront one of the ugliest realities before us. Kidnapping in Nigeria is no longer just a crime. It is an economy. Think about that. When abduction becomes systematized, when ransom becomes normalized, when communities begin to calculate survival in terms of who can be taken and how much can be paid, then we are not merely facing criminality. We are facing a parallel structure of extraction, a dark market built on fear, a market where human beings become bargaining chips, a market where roads become traps, a market where farms become taxed by gunmen, a market where parents, traders, students, villagers, commuters, and even the poor become revenue streams for armed networks. This is what should alarm every patriot, because once crime becomes profitable at scale, it begins to defend itself. It recruits, it purchases weapons, it corrupts systems, it exploits weak governance, it feeds on silence, and worst of all, it begins to look permanent. That is the danger. When insecurity becomes an economy, it stops being random. It becomes organized. And when it becomes organized, the response cannot be casual. You do not defeat an organized criminal economy with press statements alone. You do not dismantle a ransom industry with ceremonial outrage. You need intelligence. You need financial tracking. You need rural protection. You need technology. You need local trust networks. You need accountability in the security chain. And above all, you need political seriousness. Because the kidnappers are serious, the bandits are serious, the terrorists are serious. So Nigeria must become serious, not in speeches, but in results. Now let us connect the dots. Insecurity does not stop at bullets and abductions. It enters the market. It enters the kitchen. It enters the farm. It enters the future. When farmers must pay protection money to cultivate their own land, agriculture is under attack. When people abandon fertile land because armed groups control the bush paths and rural roads, food production drops. When harvest cycles are disrupted, food prices rise. When food prices rise, poverty deepens. When poverty deepens, social tension expands. And when all of that happens at scale, insecurity becomes more than a security issue. It becomes a national development crisis, a hunger crisis, a dignity crisis, and this is where many policymakers miss the full picture. A farmer in fear is not just a security statistic. That farmer is part of national stability. That farmer feeds markets. That farmer supports households. That farmer anchors rural survival. So when insecurity shuts down agriculture, it is not only villages that suffer. Cities suffer too. Inflation worsens. Families stretch meals. Household frustration rises. And the trust gap between citizens and government becomes even wider. That is why this issue is not regional. It is national. Even when the bullets are far away, the consequences are already in your pocket, on your plate, and in your peace of mind. And this brings us to the heart of the matter. Nigeria is already deep in the shadow of the 2027 elections. Timetables have been revised, political structures are adjusting, primaries are approaching, ambitions are awakening. Calculations are underway, money will move, alliances will form, and propaganda will intensify. But here is the question. What is the moral meaning of an election calendar in a country where too many citizens do not feel safe enough to live normal lives? Democracy is not just about voting dates. Democracy is about the credibility of the state. And the credibility of the state begins with its ability to protect life. Let me say that again. Before a state asks citizens to believe in ballots, it must prove that it can defend bodies. Because what kind of democracy are we practicing if people cannot travel safely between major routes? What kind of republic are we defending if communities are left exposed while the elite negotiate succession? What exactly are we campaigning for if the ground beneath the nation is unstable? This is why the Security versus 2027 debate is not really a debate of alternatives. It is a debate of priority. It is a debate of sequencing. It is a debate of seriousness. Yes, elections matter. Yes, institutions matter. Yes, political competition is part of democracy. But none of that should overshadow the immediate duty of government to secure citizens. Nigeria cannot afford a political class that behaves as if 2027 is the main event while 2026 is on fire. That would be elite detachment of the worst kind. One of the most dangerous words in governance is this: trust. Once trust begins to collapse, citizens stop believing that the state feels their pain. And when that happens, cynicism spreads faster than reform. There is a growing trust gap in Nigeria today. And frankly, many Nigerians can already feel it. They hear official optimism, but they live daily anxiety. They hear promises of progress, but they know roads that still feel like corridors of fear. They see elite activity, high-level engagements, foreign visits, strategy meetings, policy launches. But they also know that in many parts of the country, survival still depends too much on luck, prayer, local vigilance, and divine mercy. That contradiction is corrosive, because citizens begin to ask, who exactly is this government working for first? The connected or the common man? The political class or the vulnerable village? The future election or today's emergency? When young Nigerians see corps members posted to high-risk areas, when parents fear interstate travel, when farmers fear going to farm, when communities bury their dead and still hear campaign whispers in the background, the nation starts to feel emotionally abandoned, and a country that feels abandoned becomes harder to unify. Patriotism suffers when people feel unprotected. National loyalty weakens when citizens begin to think that their lives are negotiable. That is why restoring security is not only about force projection. It is also about moral repair. The state must show Nigerians, clearly and consistently, that their lives are not side notes in the national project. So what should Nigeria do? First, the country must stop treating insecurity as a recurring headline and start treating it as a systems emergency. That means intelligence-led operations must become the center, not the afterthought. Not just reacting after attacks and preventing them, tracking networks, following money, disrupting logistics, identifying collaborators, cutting supply lines. Second, Ransom flows must be attacked like the financial arteries of an underground war machine. If kidnapping is an economy, then every patriotic policy must ask, how do we make this economy unworkable? Third, rural corridors, farming belts, and vulnerable transport routes need visible and credible protection. Not symbolic deployment, effective security presence. Fourth, coordination between federal, state, local, and community intelligence structures must improve. Because too often in Nigeria, everybody is responsible, and therefore nobody is accountable. Fifth, public communication must become honest. Nigerians can handle the truth. What they resent is the gap between official language and lived reality. And finally, the political class must understand this simple principle. No election strategy, no coalition arithmetic, no succession drama, no party maneuvering should come before the urgent stabilization of the country. Nigeria needs tangible results in 2026, life-saving results. My brother, Nigeria is too important to be ruled by distraction, too strategic to be surrendered to fear, too blessed to become a hostage nation. We cannot normalize a country where insecurity sets the rhythm of daily life, while politics sets the rhythm of elite conversation. That is not sustainable, and it is not worthy of Nigeria. A patriotic Nigerian position is not to deny our problems. It is to confront them without fear, to love the country enough to tell the truth, to demand better, to insist that governance must begin with the protection of life. Because if the Nigerian state cannot secure its people, then every other promise becomes weaker. So yes, 2027 is coming. But before Nigeria asks for another election season, Nigeria must first deliver a rescue season. A season of security, a season of accountability, a season of restored confidence, a season where citizens begin to feel once again that this country belongs to them and not to fear. I am Engineer Amos, and this has been the Amos Perspective. If you believe Nigeria deserves security before spectacle, substance before politics, and leadership before calculation, then keep this conversation alive, because the future of this country will not be saved by silence. Nigeria must not remain a sovereign hostage. Nigeria must rise.